Were you ever like totally broke?
Yes, there was a time where I had to borrow money, and that was the first time I ever borrowed money. I've been completely broke several times, but that's the first time that I was broke and I didn't like how I felt. It became almost an emergency to make something happen. If we're talking about bootstrapping, if I was to do it all over again, I would start with an idea and a concept. I would build out a clickable.
So right now in this area where ad space is so expensive, how can someone generate leads for an app?
Yeah, I love this question. Step one, it's
Tim, man, what's up? Welcome to the podcast, brother.
good to be here, Daniel. It's nice to quickly chat with you too.
Of course. So first and foremost, before I get into it, man, you're a U.S. veteran. So I have to say thank you for your service and everything that you guys do.
Yeah, thank you, brother. It was one of the smartest things I did as a young guy, and thankful for it, and thank you for that.
Sure, of course. Out of every place that I could start and out of everything that I could ask you for someone who's a tech entrepreneur, but isn't someone that's so in the weeds, here's where I think is a good question to ask. So you launched your first project with $6,241.56 in your bank account. How do you remember that number to a T?
Yeah, I remember looking at it and realizing how much of a non-safety net I had, if that's a word. I remember realizing, like, man, I don't really have much resources. I heard about, tech entrepreneurs that get backed or have millions and millions of dollars, and I thought to myself, I don't know if I need millions of dollars. I would like to have more than 6,000, but I remember specifically seeing that number in my account and thinking about risk tolerance. So yeah, that's why it stands out. I was on USAA and looking at my amount of money as I was looking at what it was going to cost to develop this concept into fruition.
You mentioned a lot of companies, a lot of tech companies in particular, seek like millions of dollars in financing. Do you think that a lot of these tech companies overshoot funding or overestimate the amount of money that they really need?
I'm learning a lot, and everything that I'm learning is kind of refortifying my fear of VCs. And I know what I don't know, so I don't want to say that there isn't a viable way of using OPM or other people's money to drive progression and build a platform or infrastructure. It might be faster. It could be more efficient, but that's definitely not the way that I went. I was fearful because I feel like when you get too many people like around an idea, it can turn into a completely different platform and maybe derail and become ambiguous. And I just saw that as a risk that I wasn't wanting to take. So for me, it always made sense to do this with as few people as possible and try to be resourceful with what we had. I didn't know how to ask for money. I didn't know that there were people. I didn't know what grants were at the time. I didn't know that there were these sort of entrepreneurial incubators and different programs. I didn't really know the value of getting connected in person. Moreover, I didn't know the value of what a VC firm could offer me. So I'm still kind of trying to understand the value play there, and it's complex, and I try to avoid complexity like the plague, personally.
You're not the only one that's still seeking value from them. I'll leave that one on the side. But you mentioned earlier that $6,000 number, where that's just the amount of money that you had when you were first trying to start something. Just on a side note, were you ever like totally broke?
Yes, there was a time where I had to borrow money, and that was the first time I ever borrowed money. To kind of take you back in time, I was a military vet, which is a W-2 employee in the service, and I had everything taken care of for the most part. All my money was really kind of play money, if you will, at that point. So the military covers your housing, they cover your food, they cover your transportation in most cases, your medical bills, things of that nature. So when I was broke, I had to borrow $15,000 to finish a product that I had hoped would go out and create some traction and create some monetization. It needed to, and I think it was like by necessity that created this energy, right? This positive forward momentum. So yes, I've been completely broke several times, but that's the first time that I was broke and I didn't like how I felt, and it became almost an emergency, if you will, to make something happen. It was either do or die when my back was against the wall. And unfortunately and fortunately, I work really well when the stakes are high and the resources are limited. It almost forces me to think more tactically, like the MacGyver approach, I guess. So yeah, that's one time specifically I can remember being in the hole.
I feel that. So I know you said fortunately and unfortunately, and I would echo that because there's also a lot of entrepreneurs today who are either have their back to the wall or have their backs close to the wall. So, as someone that's went through that experience and someone that's been through that, what was your step one to getting toward where you wanted to go?
Yeah. I think philosophy, right? So our perspective matters. It shapes everything. So first off, if you are somebody that's going through that or wants to be prepared when and if that happens, I think the first philosophy is just to say good, right? Now what? You're in the situation. If there's nothing that can get you out of it outside of digging up or digging through, start with good. This didn't work out the way that I planned it. Good. This is something that is causing me pain or frustration. Good. Now what? And then the other philosophy or the mind trick, again, because perspective is the start to a decision, and decision decides your destiny. So creating that to be a successful sort of system or philosophy approach is to say, I get to instead of I have to, because that will shift and change the way that you look at situations as well. It's like, I have to go to the gym, or I have to send this email, or I have to. No, you get to. You have fingers, you have eyes. Hopefully, you have the capability to read and comprehend and apply yourself. So those moments where things get challenging, which welcome to entrepreneurship, it's every day. The further you go, sometimes the bigger the obstacles or the more complex the obstacles, you just get better. So as the pilot, I think those two key philosophies will help you hurdle a whole conglomeration of different challenges.
So you were talking about I get to versus I have to. And, I'm guilty of it in the morning. So I wake up at 6 and go to the gym. Sometimes I get up at 6 and I'm like, snooze for a few minutes, but then I have to go to the gym. Sometimes I say I got to go to the gym. So maybe that's a middle ground between get to and have to. But, I'm not perfect either. So maybe that's something I could work on. But that's it's funny to say you got that there. But is a big theme around that, or a big theme around your philosophy around there? You mentioned like if something bad happens, good. If this goes wrong, good. Does a lot of that have to do with kind of trusting God and moving on? Do you find that is like a driving force in your life?
Definitely. And it wasn't always that way. I think the military in some regards shaped that philosophy because it was either adapt and overcome or potentially perish, right? I mean, we spent a lot of time, the military, DoD, tax dollars, spent a lot of money teaching me how to either eliminate a target or avoid being eliminated. And with that becomes a lot of repetition or muscle memory or strategies to solve problems on the fly. And so part of it came from that, and just realizing that when you're in a shitty situation, especially, really bad situations, no one's coming to save you, then you got two options. You can either stand still and do nothing, which death by stagnation, indecision is a decision, or you can plan and proceed with the best decision that you could make on the fly or in that moment. And I guess step one is to really kind of macro view, look at where you're at, what's going on at the crash site, what's happening around you, who's there, who's injured, what's been some of the fallout. And then the next piece is to start asking what if, or how can we? It's asking questions while you're in an adverse situation. And the faster you can get through those questions, the faster you can get yourself out or start finding light. Now, as you're doing those things, I think like where my faith comes into this is none of anything I have is mine. It is ordained to me and given to me by Christ. This is what I believe. So my money, this table, this podcast setup, the air in my lungs, the sight, the brain that I have, in my opinion, needs to be aligned with worship and kingdom work to my Creator. Because that's what I was put here to do. It's my response to my ability. And that puts more wind in my sails than anything else ever. And you talk about living a radical life. I think that's one of the most radical ways you can live your life is as a disciple. And yeah, it's an unpopular thing, I think, a lot of times in today's culture, but that's my answer. That's what's been fulfilling for me and really kind of created a lot more philosophy or positioning direction, like heart and mind posture.
And so whether you're Jewish or Christian or kind of whatever religion, seeing yourself here is like on a mission to add value to the world.
Service.
Yeah.
Service is the highest level, I think. That's what we're supposed to do. That's truly where you become rich.
Yep. We don't sell, we serve. So, it's crazy. Most software entrepreneurs typically have like a software engineering background or went to like one of these big business or tech schools, but you didn't have a computer science background or any of that big MBA experience either. So, how did you get into the game with no experience?
Yeah, just enthusiasm and ignorance on fire. I mean, really, truthfully, it was restlessness and discontent, which has always been the start to some of my change. Again, when my back's against the wall or situations happen that's not favorable, something is, encroaching on my freedom, or I don't know, I guess joy in life has always been this sort of audit time. So for me in the military, actually, I was a contractor at this point. I was about 30 miles north of Iraq in a control tower. There was a sandstorm outside and I had a cracked laptop, and it was during this moment. It was June. It's probably like 110 plus degrees outside, and I'd been overseas for years, and I had been wrestling with time. I would see quotes about time, and I would get real restless about how I'm spending time for dollars, and I became obsessed during this restlessness with what can I do. So I started writing things down. I have a green notebook that has every idea that was going to create freedom in my life. And most of them weren't able to pay me in the way that I wanted to be paid, both with time, freedom, income, and less stress. I didn't want to manage a bunch of people or light bills or infrastructure costs. So ultimately, long story short, software made sense. I had an idea, no formal education, and I went out and failed and failed and failed and learned. I failed forward enthusiastically and ultimately arrived at a place where I hit a home run, and that created belief. And I've been riding that wave since and proving, stacking evidence that you can be in software and you can be in tech without a formal degree. And you can create a lot of really cool things if you so desire to learn with the intent to apply. I mean, that's kind of the whole story.
What was that home run, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah. So the first platform that we saw success with was a platform called Rocket Grow, and it automated basically, think about everybody's social media channel, kind of like a billboard on the side of the road, right? And there's millions and billions of cars that are on the internet highway. Our platform would take somebody's ideal audience member online and tap them on the shoulder to bring them back to their billboard, if you will, on social media. So it created a ton of engagement, interaction, and we would teach people, one, how to set up their profile to be an attractive billboard, and then number two, how to filter and identify the ideal people to then drive them back to their channel through automation. It was around that same time we learned about API and what to do with it, what not to do with it, and lived through that experience of adapting, right? We learned that we were engaging with API illegally at that point. And unbeknownst to me, it was brand new in tech. I didn't know even what API was at that point. So it resulted in me educating myself and then positioning sort of my own legal team, and then learning and defining who we were going to be, what we were going to do from that instance. So I look at it like if you're in business and you haven't got a cease and desist, it's almost like playing a sport and not ever getting a yellow card. Like, are you really playing if you don't get a strike? Are you really playing if you don't get, you're not getting a card? And that sort of callus or muscle that you build through going through those tough experiences is what I've already been talking about, which is, failing forward and adapting. So yeah, that did, like, I won't disclose it did more in revenue than I'd ever seen before. And gave me proof and evidence that, oh man, this is something that could generate a large amount of revenue and something that could, I can build helpful things for people.
Fair enough. One of the things that you were talking about earlier, you said that if you haven't gotten a cease and desist, have you really been playing? So sometimes ignorance can really be bliss in business. So it was funny to hear about that. But say, for example, if someone similar to you, but in like an earlier stage, has an idea for an app, but also has no coding background, what should be step one in getting their idea off the ground?
Such a good question. And I hope this helps people too. I think step one for any entrepreneur is just believe. I know it's not like probably a common thing that people were thinking that I was going to say, but if you don't believe in yourself genuinely, you're not going to go far in anything, whether you're trying to play an instrument or trying to play a sport or develop a platform or an app or a solution. So step one is believe that, hey, it is possible. I'm living proof that it's possible. So I like to transcend that belief. That's step one. I guess step two would be to get very, very clear on what your product does, why it's the logical choice platform in the market, and what the results will be when users start leveraging it. And I think if you think about those three criteria as you are designing, the reality is human beings, we only have so many ways that we can retain information. So the way I've always designed is through visual, audible, and written. And I use Google Docs, and now I use a platform called UiZard, which uses AI, so I can literally draw, and then it creates wireframes for me. And then I can drag and drop. I don't have to have a bunch of technical experience with, other platforms that are out there for design. Other platform. I am actively having a vision for what the user experience is going to be like, what it's going to look like, and I'm typing out in detail the steps that someone will go to as they're using each feature. And I think that's 95%, 90% of developing your own thing is getting very crystal clear on what it is, why it's the logical choice, and who it's going to serve when it's live. And if you can visually and audibly and writtenly describe that, some people call it a spec sheet, some people call it an SRS, some people call it a blueprint. I call it your vision plan or your, the logistics of what you're going to do. That's what you have quoted. And I would always just urge people to start with a clickable prototype versus trying to build their software just from complete scratch. I think starting with a design is way smarter because you're going to arrive at the framework to what you want, and then you can put the engine in it after. And you may be able to secure some funding, whether through a bank or through an SBA loan or through your own means to then get this concept funded if you've done a really good job of thinking about what it is, why it's going to be awesome, and what it's going to do for people. You really can't go wrong with that. Again, back to what you were saying, Daniel, service, right? That is it. We're all paid in direct proportion to our ability to solve problems. And if you're thinking about why your platform is going to be the logical choice for X, you're going to arrive somewhere really good no matter what you're building.
On a more technical level, say somebody has a clickable interface or a clickable app. What's the step-by-step process for getting on those app stores?
Yeah, so if you're let's assume that you're in my situation, right? Like I needed developers to be able to write code, and I needed to be able to interpret that was a good paint job, if you will. So, my process, I failed forward and got scammed and wasted time and money with the wrong developers. So if I was to go back, or if I'm to give advice now, I would suggest working with someone that's done it and reverse engineering how you get connected. I would just reverse engineer my situation instead of going out to Upwork or Fiverr or LinkedIn and trying to cast the net of, hey, who can help me? Because you're going to get a sea of hands and people that are going to tell you that they're your guy. I would find someone that has existing software and ask, who did you work with? And start developing relationships with development houses that have capabilities and experience. And then take that prototype to them to get quoted, but then also get the technical answers. But getting an app on the App Store just requires an Apple account or a developer account with Apple or with the Play Store. So there's a submission process and a kind of a grading criteria, if you will, that they can cross-check or share insight on how your platform can be hosted on these Play Stores.
So it sounds like in the beginning, instead of just finding the cheapest person on one of these third-party platforms, the best option would be to be a little bit patient and pay a little bit of a premium if you have to.
Yeah, and again, if we're talking about bootstrapping, if I was to do it all over again, I would start with an idea and a concept. I would build out a clickable prototype because that's going to cost way less than developing a native app or just going straight into development. I would work on getting a really good clickable prototype or workable design. And then I would use that to collect quotes from a multitude of different dev shops and use my gut intuition and then also resources to figure out who the best team would be to bring that to fruition, both cost effectively and, performance wise. So that's exactly how I would do it technically. And then, I would agilely follow along with that product as it's going through the development phases and sequences and be an active quality assurance guy, project manager during the entirety of it.
So another big issue that a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with is getting in front of their customers, partially because advertising is so expensive nowadays for a variety of reasons, which, we could talk about in a whole nother episode, but I'll leave that for now. So right now in this area where ad space is so expensive, how can someone generate leads for an app?
Yeah, I love this question. And so step one, it's very challenging to develop a platform. There's a lot of different ambiguities and things that'll kill you in the process to getting to the shipyard. So step one, assuming that you've got a great product out, the next milestone, the next challenge or hill to climb is definitely new client acquisition or sales. I see this so many times where great teams have awesome products, awesome team members, the right hearts, the right mind, but they suck at getting people into the door because it's a whole nother system or process. So I guess start again, and I'm assuming that people are bootstrapping. That's what I want people to do. I want people to go out and make it happen on their own. A vertical that I would highly suggest people tap into is direct outreach. And it's going to take some elbow grease. It's going to take some attention to how you're swinging the axe or throwing the pitch, if you will. But direct outreach, assuming, your product is more B2B, you should probably be doing direct outreach on LinkedIn. And I don't mean crafting a text message because that just flat out won't work. I highly recommend creating short videos of, hey, Daniel, my name's Tim. I built a product that does XYZ. I noticed that you do this. Hey, man, if I set up a 10-minute demo, would you jump on with me? Cool. Look forward to connecting with you. Do that 100 times a day. And the reality is demos create dollars. And if you don't have one system proven that creates new client acquisition, you're screwed. I mean, that's just the reality. So video direct outreach, it's uncomfortable. You're going to suck at it at first. Do it anyway. And I've got a whole systems and things that have worked and ways that I've critiqued a pitch. Now, I always do something with the intent to teach other people in my organization, but I'm a firm believer that if you're the product owner, you're the guy, you need to go the way and know the way so you can show the way. And approving a methodology of direct, new client acquisition that's cold, that you can calculate and start to scale from is highly important. So, and it's not going to be comfortable. And maybe you work with a partner or you find that person that's naturally good at connecting or good at creating lead generation, or maybe you work with a company. I mean, good luck there. Again, you're going to run into people that'll tell you that you got to have good intuition and be willing to test at a low cost, I think. But typically, to get more technical about how you do it, I created a bunch of brand shells, if you will, on social media accounts that say our branding on it, and they look kind of like a billboard. If folks look up TrueFanz, they'll see what I'm talking about on Instagram. I don't care how many engagements the posts get. It's simply the billboard. And then I assign those to virtual assistants, and they go out and send messages and book appointments all day long using the method that I was sharing. And that's just if we're using Instagram. You got to know your audience. Where are they? What are they interested in? find that rapport, internet etiquette, and be different. I mean, so many people are sending text messages or email messages, and they get the open rates that they get because most people are ignoring them or blocking them. So if you want to stand out, be authentic, send a video message, find things that you have in common with the other human being, and start treating the other human being with what I call internet etiquette that will make you stand out from the crowd.
So
And then have the courage and the balls to do it. I mean, that's the hard part.
Yeah, no, it's definitely tough, and I think people need to have the chutzpah, I would add, to do it in the beginning, because I think you'll realize that the more you practice it, the better you get at it, which for whatever reason seems to not have been remembered by today's generation. But again, that's for another day. But I have a bit of a hot take here. What do you think about using humor in those initial sales calls?
I love it, man. I mean, don't force it. I think if something funny comes up, that's great. Acknowledge that. I think just be a human. I mean, the same thing. I think we're a lot more tactical when we start thinking about how to court someone, right? Versus some of the folks that reach out to other people that want to do business with them online. They don't even consider like what would be important to them or what they would be interested in or what commonalities they have. They don't do their own reconnaissance before even saying hello to someone. And I think the best networkers, the best lead generators are people that genuinely care about connecting people to the right tools, resources, etc. And they listen with the intent to be helpful. And it's not tactical, right? It's not like they're not tactically using humor as a means to get what they want. They're genuinely listening with the intent to help. And that's the highest level of networking, I think, that you can get to, is when you truly are listening with a sincere level of admiration and interest. That will help you make more friends and close more deals than anything else, I think.
So say, for example, if you have that set up, if you have, that video with maybe a little bit of humor and you start to get a few clients, say you get 50, 60, maybe your first 100 clients or 100 users, how do you scale that to get to 1,000 users on your platform?
Okay, so like using humor as a means to like create.
Well, not even, just kind of how do you make the leap from your first 100 users to your first 1,000 users?
Yeah, good question. So you just look at what you were doing and then you do more of it. It's a simple way. So for example, when I first was proving that new client acquisition could be done personally, I needed to multiply my time and I needed to multiply the output that was happening. So naturally, I looked to clone the systems and the tools that I was using and the scripts, right, that I was using and the philosophy and the idea. So I had to train other people to do what I was doing. So in order to save cost, again, back to the bootstrap, and in order to get the output that I was looking for, I hired virtual assistants. I hired VAs, and I had them send out these texts with little videos, and it's still working to this day. I mean, one of our platforms will do 6.3 million this year, and we've not run a single ad. It's all been through direct outreach, through virtual assistants that I pay anywhere from $500 to $1,000 a month that are generating new business. So you just think about, okay, what am I doing now? How do I clone this? It doesn't have to be some special form. It's just literally, how do I create more activity? And, okay, well, first you have to see what you're doing. And then you have to, you have to educate those steps or that system and put the right person in a right system. You could have the right person in the wrong system and you're not going to get the right output. So, keep that in mind too.
Say if from there, I know you said that a good thing to go to scale is to kind of keep doing what you're doing. Say we're thinking about growing past 1,000 users and we're thinking about the 10,000, 100,000, million, this really large user base. Does it get harder to scale and manage those systems as you approach that exponential growth?
Yeah, and the truth is it's a great question too. So we've always empowered affiliate programs with every one of our platforms because we're totally cool with paying an ongoing royalty for someone that connected the dots between us and an organization, maybe a vertical, For example, if we take TrueFanz, right, which is one of the platforms we have a referral program to, we can pay 5% for life on all gross volume generated by someone that somebody invites. So if somebody knows a creator that does that has 100,000, a million, or more followers, the likelihood of them producing significant income is high. Just by introducing them to our platform and being an active referral partner, you're going to passively make 5% of their total volume every month, forever. So that offer to existing users that are having a good experience amplifies referrals and testimonials. And, it's not multi-level. We didn't want to incentivize the income generation of it. We truly wanted to incentivize and thank people for promoting us or referring their friends or connections. But doing something like that, I still stand behind this. I think 70 or 80% of your business should be referrals. That's a good indicator that you're doing things right. So if you can create systems that enhance referrals, you can create more social growth. That's just a smart thing to do.
So you're almost just aligning everyone's incentives.
Yep. And then you make it easy. When somebody's using the platform, all they have to do is click 2 buttons and they can social promote with their specified link to 5 or 6 different major platforms within a few clicks. And if somebody's really excited because they just withdrew their first $1,000, they could share that and tell their friend. We try to make that as simple as possible for people to create awareness about something that's good.
So it's great to have social proof, but a lot of really early entrepreneurs still kind of lack that social proof or lack some of those resources to get started. Are there any programs out there or any kind of free value out there that entrepreneurs can grab at when they're just starting out early on to really learn the basics when it comes to building something?
Yeah, there definitely are. So recently, about almost 2 years ago now, almost 2 years ago, I started, I'm a state servant for the Small Business Development Center and the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. That's where I live now in Indiana. And the mission or the ethos of these two organizations is driving economic development through the support of small business. So what's exciting about this is most people have never heard of the SBDC, but they're national. They're in every single state. They're in everyone's backyard if you've got listeners here in America. And all they'd have to do is search SBDC near me. And most of the time, these centers are housed within major universities or economic development organizations. But I will always be an advocate for teaching entrepreneurs to get in the way of opportunity and into these ecosystems in their local area to get belly to belly with new education, potential grants, potential help advisement with writing a vision plan or business plan. Having somebody help you with your P&Ls, or maybe you're wanting to do business with the state or federal government. So interfacing with the SBDC is a great way to find tools, resources, and these certification processes at no cost. There's literally zero cost. And the truth is, not every center is made the same. While it's not like a franchise in a way where you can kind of expect, Chick-fil-A to taste the same if you go to different states or cities. It's not always the case. So my advice would be to find your local SBDCs, book a meeting with your advisor, an advisor there or state director, and know what you need help with before you go to that meeting, that one-on-one consultation, because the likelihood of them knowing someone that you need to know or pointing you to a resource is very high. It's just a cool way. Again, you talk about new client acquisition, amazing way to get some PR and some help getting unstuck and maybe even some new sales. Hopefully that explains it. That at a national level, the SBA funds the SBDC, and the SBDC is in, again, every state in the U.S. And in Indiana specifically, there's about 110 or 112 advisors, and their job is literally to interface with entrepreneurs or employers that have under 500 employees, and they can help them start, grow, or exit at no cost.
So thinking about the other side of the SBDC. So for those that don't know, it stands for Small Business Development Center, kind of nationally funded program to help out early entrepreneurs. but thinking about the other side of it. So as you're aware, there's a lot of talking heads out there on CNBC, Fox, CNN, wherever you get your mainstream news. Is there anything you think they say that you think is total BS?
And I always look at things, and I'll try not to put a tinfoil hat on, but I tend to hear what people say, and then I try to dig into what their motivations are, or who they work with, or where their interests align. None of our politicians or none of our government folks are wearing NASCAR jackets with the patches on it of who their special interest supporters are, their advertisers.
Even though those that exists though for everyone, when that's a good way of looking at it. For whenever you look at these politicians, just think about them wearing an invisible NASCAR, like a NASCAR jacket. So you see the
Right.
NASCAR drivers who they're sponsored by. Politicians have the same uniform on. You just can't see the stickers.
Yeah.
I felt like I had to add.
And thinking about that might change the way that you're consuming media. So I can't help but look at media outlets, and I typically follow the money in how they're getting funded, where they're generating income, where does it get spent, what's going on with, and then you find out intentionality, or you find out maybe why something's being said a certain way, or really kind of lift the veil. So I don't really listen oftentimes anymore to like what people are saying on the front end. I really want to know who they are, what they're about. And I don't know, I guess personally I want to work with people that are great people, that are mission minded and less economics and more like economics. And those you gotta filter through.
I love the thing that you brought up, that NASCAR thing. I'm gonna use that, where at least they're honest about their sponsors. But I think that's also a really good thing to keep in mind whenever you see politicians debating, regardless of their political party, to keep in mind who's really kind of the puppet master behind all of this, and then that'll help you know their incentive. So I thought that was a really good point. But you mentioned your latest project, TrueFanz, a few times. So not to be confused with OnlyFans, which is something else, but TrueFanz helps creators get paid. And there are a ton of social media platforms, as you're aware, out there. So the basic ones like LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. But what do you think those platforms are missing when it comes to rewarding creators?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I forgot to kind of mention that. So TrueFanz was built to be a wholesome alternative to what was out there. And we've done a great job with that, being invite only, not allowing adult content, but having a whole slew of monetization features. We have like 12 different ways that creators can get paid to manage their communities on our platform. So just to describe a little bit about what TrueFanz is and isn't, that's important. But as far as building TrueFanz, we wanted to figure out what is the logical choice, right? And that's where you do reconnaissance in the market and you figure out where there are gaps. I think when we started 5 years ago, the gaps were even more prevalent. I guess maybe they were less prevalent than they are now. So what stunk about other platforms was the fact that, you can be banned off of it with no customer support and no explanation as to why. The other thing that still happens, you don't own your data. They do. You ask for it, they might give it to you. They might not. So your customer list is your asset as an entrepreneur or a business owner, and to not own that isn't a good thing. The other thing is that, they really kind of suppressed free speech and free market. If the conglomerates didn't like what you were saying or what you were about or what you stood for, they could silence you. That's been proven and shown multiple times. We didn't like that. And then, the rest of the platforms championed the adult space, and we didn't want to be that. So, when we went out and sought and did reconnaissance on what was out there, the logical choice for us was to be 100% invite only, create this feel of not just anybody can join. You have to be invited, or you have to be asked to join. Yeah. The other thing was we weren't going to allow adult content. So we work with people that want to monetize, but they don't want the stigma. Again, they can be models, they can be musicians, they can be male, female, whatever. But the biggest keys that I think, like feature-wise, that we brought to existence that no one else had was instant payout. So you don't have to wait for your money when it exists. I don't think that's offered on any other platform to the best of my knowledge. I could be wrong. But when you make money, you can take how much or how little you wish when you want. I think another feature that makes us stand out is guess, man, there's so really, I think what makes us stand out from the crowd is that because we're a smaller platform, we listen with the intent to engineer. So all of the features that are coming out, all the features that are in the pipeline, all the features that have come out are a direct result of somebody sharing information as to what they want, and then us listening with the intent to build that. And then we have creators vote on features that they admire, and that dictates the cadence of what gets rolled out. So it's not me or the team sitting in a room thinking about, oh, what would make this awesome? Although we do that, we are sharing a feature request board that people can then submit thumbs up or thumbs down, which kind of guide our decision. So it truly is a platform built by creators for creators. And, I could go down a tangent. I don't think the future is TrueFanz. I don't think the future is OnlyFans, Coffee, Patreon, Twitch, YouTube, any of that. I think the future is more empowered creative entrepreneurs that own their own server, that own their own site, that own their own app, that own their own infrastructure, and they hold the keys to the kingdom. And then a tech company takes a micro percent to be that sort of technical support liaison.
We'll have to see where the future holds. But you mentioned all those different monetization paths and that you did set up instant payouts, which is something that's really sexy in the tech industry, or kind of getting there just to stay more competitive. But how much do you think some of the top creators are making on TrueFanz?
Some make over $100,000 a month. Some make $20,000 a month. Some make $500 a month. Everybody's got different. Some make $50 a month or $10. It depends on their goals, right? So when every new creator comes and gets access, to the platform, we do a strategy session with them, a tour of the platform where our guys, their goal is to find out who they are, where they're at, where they want to go, what their ideal monthly income would be, and then we set up kind of a workout plan based on that, where we start with methodologies that we've seen work. We start with just ways that they can start creating their personal brand if they haven't really yet, ways that they can sort of de-risk their personal brand too by owning these platforms and their usernames on these platforms, if you will. There's just a really sort of like one-on-one approach that we take to helping them with strategy to hit their objectives, whatever they may be. It truly is more of like a synergistic partnership.
So, well, one, I would like to say, $100,000 a month isn't so bad, especially for anyone, but especially a creator. So awesome that you guys are getting a chance to make that happen. Thinking back to your journey in particular and everything that you've done, as you know, every entrepreneurial journey has its ups and its downs. Do you remember your lowest point as an entrepreneur?
Yeah. It had been a whole year. I'll tell the story. So I was in this building, conference room 1A downstairs, and I had a really crucial conversation with one of my engineers that in my mind initially a year ago was going to help me bring a really cool platform to life. So after thousands and thousands of dollars injected, tons of conversations and time and sweat, energy invested, we scrapped the project and scrapped the team. And I remember being in tears, just thinking, what a waste, what a terrible experience, what a terrible situation to be in, what an ugly conversation, what an unfun thing. But I never considered quitting, but it definitely dampened some of the energy for a little while. But most importantly, I think what it taught me was to take the wrong guy out of the playing field as soon as possible for the betterment of the team. So an analogy I think about is like I had a quarterback in that I knew could throw touchdown, but he was not throwing touchdown, and I should have taken him out months ago instead of hoping he would be the quarterback that we needed. And I carry that sort of weight, if you will, and that experience from that situation. You live and learn.
Yep. Sounds like what Nick Saban did in the national championship game, I think 6 or 7 years ago. So that technique can definitely work. But here's where I want to end. After digging a bit into your background, I know you said that growing up, personally, you didn't make the best choices. So I want you to imagine we made a time machine and you could go back in time and talk to young Tim. In one sentence, what would you tell him?
God loves you. Probably something that I'd tell him.
Not used to these kind of questions, huh?
No, it's a really good question. Props to you for streaming those together. It's been a fun show. It made me think.
Got it. I appreciate it, man. Well, Tim, really appreciate you talking about the journey, and thanks again for coming on the podcast.
It's been a pleasure, Daniel. Thank you.
What's up, Business is Blumin Squad? Thanks for listening to today's episode. I'm excited to say that the podcast is growing across all platforms, but I'm on a mission to make Businesses Blumin the world's #1 entrepreneurship podcast, and I need your help to get there. So, if you've enjoyed the conversations and learned anything valuable from the content, then please subscribe to the podcast. Subscribing helps me immensely and lets me reinvest in the show to make things even bigger and better for you. So, thanks, and I'll see you next time.